Just Mayor Rockingham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a responsibility to listen to our children. Gay straight alliances or queer straight alliances are student-led and staff-supported organizations that promote the creation of peer support networks and foster welcoming and caring and respectful, safe environments for LGBTQ2+ students and their allies. Having a GSA in a school reduces suicidal ideation for both LGBTQ2+ identified youth and those who are straight. The question we have to ask ourselves is what is truly important? Well, GSAs are important and they're necessary. We have, in fact, on our entire side of this caucus, said that. The entire legislature agrees that ensuring that there are no mandatory notifications as to whether a child is in a GSA, we all completely agree. To create the environment where bullying is not accepted, we honor Anti-Bullying Week this week for those exact reasons. I'd like to speak about bullying a little bit, actually, and I'd like to share some correspondence with the House. One of the quotes is, "I watched, and then I watched her walk out and not vote. How much homophobia are you going to excuse until you too wear the label?" Second one, "She is paid to vote, not to hide." These are the people that you are exposing our vulnerable children to? People who are offended because we ask legitimate questions, Mr. Speaker, about the safety of our children, all of our children, Mr. Speaker. You know what is important? Standing up for our children and for our youth and asking questions even if they're difficult questions, Mr. Speaker. I have never in my life had to prove that I'm an ally. I don't have to tell people that I'm an ally, and I certainly do not need to prove it in this House that I'm an ally. And if the government wants to attack me just for the sake of attacking or anybody else, by all means, that is your right. And attacking one's character has been the overwhelming method of this government, and using every single methodology to do that, honestly, if you want to admonish me or my caucus for our votes, that is your right, Mr. Speaker. But it does nothing to help move us forward. Nothing. You can call me whatever you want. You can certainly try, and you can even say that if I come near any pride events, you will out me. I would love to actually know what that means, Mr. Speaker. Maybe somebody can clarify that for me. There are people, these are the people you want influencing our youth? The people who are saying those things. That's not bullying at all, is it, Mr. Speaker? Not at all. These are the friends that you want to have coming in to help the youth work together. These are common bullies. The kind of people that we want to protect our children from. And the government, just because they call themselves allies, that makes their attacks okay. In what world is that okay? And I have to ask myself, I mean, this is ridiculous. The behavior, the mistruths, the lack of common sense. You may not tell me whether or not I can attend Pride. Or did you forget we live in a free society? Maybe you've forgotten that. You may not tell me whether or not I can go. And in fact, I've been there for years, long before I was a politician. I stand here in front of all you now, and let me be clear. I will never vote for any government, mine or yours, to influence a student-led organization, ever. Any GSAs. GSAs are supposed to be student-led, not government-led. I will actually stand up for these kids, their rights and their ability to have a club that is created by them for the reasons they need and want, not what politicians want, neither you or me. And come in and set a standard as to how a GSA is going to work. They already have this autonomy, Mr. Speaker. They're already above the School Act. They're outside of it. Why would you even consider bringing the School Act into something that is already autonomous and has the ability to run on its own, run by the students? These kids need the space to do this themselves. They already have a GSA director to help them with their club, and that is their person. That's their go-to. Instructional time is indicated in Section 50.1, sub 1 of the School Act, is not presently part of the GSAs, and that's a good thing. I can't for the life of me figure out why the government is opening this club to instructional time that has nothing to do with the GSA. can you ensure student safety by doing that? That is what the minister just said, to ensure student safety. How is that possible if the GSA is no longer run just by the students, for the students, on behalf of the students? A GSA is a peer support anti-bullying club, and it's already out of the scope of the School Act. It is a club. The government wants to change that. Then it should state those intentions clearly. State them clearly. Create a new bill, Mr. Speaker. Create a new bill to amend the School Act with the appropriate consultation, outreach, and debate that a change of this magnitude would require. If you did that, I could respect that. But to do it under this bill that states that, for the record, if for some reason we don't vote for it, that we're voting against GSAs, that is not true. We already believe in GSAs. We already support the present legislation, and I actually would have voted for this legislation if that would have been amended, happily, and I've stated that for the record. No government or other organizations of any stripe should be able to walk into a student-led organization, Mr. Speaker, and begin to influence students as it see fit. And you know what? I know the government's going to think that that's just pointed at them. I don't want my government going in there either. No government should ever have that ability to do that. There is no good reason to exempt GSAs from something that they're not part of in the first place. I've spoken to so many constituents and teachers and principals and students and GSA directors and parents, and the one thing that we can all agree on is that we want safe and caring spaces for our students in their schools. The issue around Bill 24 in that section is that that section deals with the rights of parents to be informed. If the government wants to deal with that section, bring it out separately. Let's debate it here in the legislature and look at the School Act separately. If that's the way the government wants to go, Mr. Speaker, that's what you do. You don't hide it in another piece of legislation. Voluntary student organizations, referred to as GSAs, could allow any government, via this section, any government, to be able to go in and influence a student-led organization. Why does the government want to seek that? Why would they want, if in some reason they're not in government in the future, that some other government could do that? For any of their own purposes. This is so wrong, Mr. Speaker. It's completely contradictory to what this legislation is supposed to do in the first place. These are peer-led support clubs, and the whole point is to have a space where kids can become friends and allies. They're supposed to be outside of the scope of the education, of the School Act, Mr. Speaker. Outside of the scope, independent, and safely away from the influence of anybody else other than the students that lead them. That was the point. That's who this is for. These groups give the child a chance who are questioning their sexuality or have friends or want to talk about things to be able to do that without the influence of anybody else. Isn't that the point, Mr. Speaker? They also allow other students to gain a better appreciation of problems facing peers. They talk about any number of things. Anybody who's attended a GSA, who's had the privilege of talking to these kids, know they talk about absolutely everything. I can't imagine if I had the ability to influence that the wrong way. If they invite me in, that's one thing. I'm there to listen, not to direct. I mean, the fact that 40% of our homeless are LGBTQ youth that are turned out by their parents, why would you give any opportunity to come in through an opposing place when they are able to do this on their own right now? I mean, I cannot understand if, again, I have to state this again, Mr. Speaker, if the government wants to change the School Act, then do that. Bring that legislation forward with integrity and research and background and stakeholder outreach and inclusive of everybody who's involved in that. Yes, let's debate that happily. That's what we were asking for. But the fact that there is a loophole now that could open that door to anybody to be able to come and influence a student-led organization is completely wrong. I would like to state for the record that most of this bill is extremely logical to me. And I felt I could support it, but I dug deeper and I talked to so many people and it felt it was necessary to amend the bill and strike the section that brings the potential for this instruction in. Unfortunately, that amendment was defeated, and I can't understand why, because it does nothing. That amendment has nothing to do with GSAs. Nothing. Section 50.1 sub 1 has nothing to do with GSAs. Nothing. Outside of the scope of GSAs. So take it out. Take it out and I'll vote for it. Take it out. It has nothing to do with GSAs. Nothing. If the government wants to call us disgusting, go ahead. By all means, call us all disgusting. Say it for the record, though, and have the guts to say it loud and proud. I know you have. Thank you for pointing that out. Believe me, because, Mr. Speaker, guess what? That's what's been directed at me, and that's what's going to get directed at our children. Because honestly, if this is how leadership is going to lead, if that's how leadership is going to lead, what are they going to do on the backside? Not just that government, any government, and I include myself in that. Mr. Speaker, if the word disgusting is allowed to be used in this, then let me use it. It's absolutely disgusting that the government would not look at this part of the bill separately, bring it in front of people, bring it forward, debate it legitimately in this legislature so we can all have an opinion. But instead it's hidden in smoke and mirrors. You wear that. You wear that.
Point of order.
Order, Mr. Speaker. I hate to interrupt the honourable member in full dudgeon, but the remarks ought to be directed through the chair, and pointing and saying you in the speech is clearly out of order. And, perhaps the honourable member might, remember that.
Sure she will. Honourable member.
For pointing that out. The interesting thing, Mr. Speaker, is that there's a double standard here. Just so that you know, abstaining from a vote, Mr. Speaker, is a legitimate vote. I will be abstaining from this vote because I agree with 90%, well, even probably 80% of this bill. Abstaining is done only by leaving the room. If I could, Mr. Speaker, if there was a change made where I could sit with my body physically in this House and abstain, I would. And unless that change is made by this afternoon or before this vote is done, there is no chance for me to be able to do that. But I will not, Mr. Speaker, I will not vote against this bill. I will not vote against this bill. And there's nothing that the government can say to me that has not already been said that hasn't made me understand the consequences of what I'm saying right now. The difference is I'm willing to say it here. The government has argued, Mr. Speaker, that GSAs are not instructional. So there is no need for it to be part of 50.1 sub 1, 2, 3, or 4. Remove that section, and you got me. The government is overstepping its authority with this change and has absolutely no right to interfere with a student-led organization. Not this government, not any future governments, any government that I should be a part of in the future. I would want no part of influencing a GSA, ever. So let's bring that section forward and debate it appropriately. That's all I'm asking for. You can call all conservative MLAs homophobic, Mr. Speaker. You can fearmonger that we're the enemy, which is really not a logical answer to any of the questions that I've put forward. And if that's what you want to say, you can.
Meadowlark, tone it down.
Mr. Speaker, this is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Every single person that I talk to, including all of my friends that are LGBTQ2+ youth, adults, everybody who is in my life, the people I love most in life, from here in Canada all the way across the world, every single one of them that I explained this legislation to couldn't understand why something that is already beautiful and protected would need to go through the situation of what this government is putting it through. There's absolutely no logical reason to include 50.1 sub 1, 2, 3, or 4. The only reason to be able to do it is to try and change and exempt and amend something within the School Act without actually bringing that act forward. It's the only logical answer. And the comments that will come is that, I'm voting against this bill because I'm being forced to. I'm not voting against the bill. I'm abstaining. I will physically not be here. I'm telling you that because I don't want to vote against the bill. It was never my intention. I'm saying that in front of my caucus. They're all right here right now. We've had this discussion. You can suggest that I don't have my own voice or my own, well, you don't know me very well. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, is that this government can say that a vote against this bill makes us whatever it is that they'd like to present in the rest of the world. But the rest of the world doesn't believe them. And if they think that they can change people's opinion about me, because, or anybody in my caucus, or these wonderful people, anybody in the House who has an outreach of people that they love, that all of us are impacted by how we vote on this bill. You don't think anybody on this side of the House has people that has come to them and said, can you explain to me why you would vote against this bill? And they haven't had to do that? You think that they're just not aware, Mr. Speaker, that this vote could have an impact even on their own constituencies, the people that they love? So,
go ahead. Keep it down.
And again, Mr. Speaker, this is what we're dealing with. I am bringing forward a legitimate asking question about why 50.1 sub 1, 2, 3, and 4 are in this legislation and why it can't be pulled out and debated separately under the School Act where it should be. That is a separate piece. If the government keeps saying that this is not instructional, then why does it need to be exempted from instructional? Please, it's a really simple question. Oh, I know what it is. It's to protect kids from me. That's right, I forgot. It's to protect kids from my caucus. Right, how silly of me. I didn't realize that. Thank you for protecting me from myself. Boy, I'm absolutely blown away. And thank you for protecting all of the people that I love in the world from me because you suggest that my intentions could possibly be anything other than asking about section 50.1.4. Honestly, by all means. And bully away. None of us are in this house because we're afraid of bullying. But those kids outside are. And for anybody in the government to assume that a teacher would purposefully go out of their way to do that is wrong. If the legislation needed to be strengthened for that, 100% behind it. All the GSA teachers, instructors, and everybody that I spoke to, Mr. Speaker, thought that that was a good idea. It's a great idea. 100% behind it. That has nothing to do with 50.1 sub 1, 2, 3, and 4. Nothing. Completely separate. But if you want to strengthen the legislation to make sure that teachers understand their role within this, you have my vote. 100%. And that was fairly much a consensus amongst the people that I talked to as well. But 50.1, sub 1, 2, 3, and 4 have nothing to do with whether or not a teacher can tell or to notify a parent outside of the scope of GSA. I mean, let's separate GSAs and the regular scope. The government, thank goodness, was finally clear yesterday when one of our members on this, when one of the opposition members asked about parental involvement. This is my questions from the beginning, so thank you for clearing that up. GSAs are completely separate from whether or not teachers have the authority to describe what's going on in a child's life. Completely separate. So 50.1, 2, 3, and 4 do not apply. The legislation is clear that if a teacher needs to tell a parent something, it is for reasons of distress or anything else, has nothing to do with the GSA, nor should it. Completely agree. All I'm asking, and call me what you want, nobody will believe this government if they want to throw accusations this way at me. By all means, go right ahead. In fact, I challenge you to try and find it. But my point is, and what I will continue to say, is that if the government is willing to take out this section and debate it legitimately outside of the scope of this bill, especially because GSAs presently sit outside of the scope of this bill, I will vote. I'll stand here and vote in favor with you. I will. Yeah, I will. But thank you, Minister. But see, this is the thing. This is the funny thing about being in here. Everybody on that side thinks they know better. They just told me what I'm going to do. Welcome to what that looks like. Because obviously I don't know my own mind, and obviously I'm being directed by somebody else. That's hysterical. Because I could have just as easily been directed by the bullying coming from that side. Which I might add was profound. I only shared a minuscule amount with you. Massive amounts. I actually thought that one of those guys was going to show up in my bedroom and yell and scream at me. It It was unbelievable. And you know what? This face-to-face and this kind of discussion, I'm okay with that. Because you can tell me to my face what you think. I dare you. But one thing I'm going to say, Mr. Speaker, the word's disgusting. You know what? There is an interesting thing that what you put out is what you get back. Well, people who say things like that better be looking at their own reflections. Because quite frankly, that sort of language, Mr. Speaker, I would assume that is unparliamentary. Thank you.
The honourable member for Strathcona, Sherwood Park.